Leave him, she said through clenched teeth. Let him taste the pain he gave us. But Imoh looked at her, eyes steady. Mama, I swore an oath. If I leave him, what makes me different from him? Without a word, he paid the deposit himself. The hospital light buzzed faintly as the clock ticked past midnight. Dr. Imoh Bassey stood outside the operating room, the receipt of payment still in his hand. His mother, Mrs. Bassey, sat in silence across from him, her face carved with disbelief and sorrow. How could you, Imoh? She whispered. After everything he did to us? Imoh looked at her, his voice soft but firm. If I deny him care, Mama, I would be no better than the pain we've endured. I treat patients, not people's past. She didn't reply, just stared at the door as the surgical team rushed in with Uncle Edet on the stretcher. The operation lasted hours. There had been damage to Edet's spine, severe but manageable. When it was over, the surgeon came out, tired but calm. He survived, he said, but he may never walk again. A silence fell in the waiting room. Days passed. Uncle Edet woke up in a hospital bed, confused and angry. When he saw Imoh standing by his bedside in a white coat, his pride crumbled. You? He rasped. Yes, uncle, Imoh answered quietly. I'm your doctor. Tears welled in the old man's eyes. For the first time, he saw not the child he'd thrown out years ago, but the man he had become. Mrs. Bassey didn't visit. She stayed home, wrestling with emotions that didn't fit into words. Weeks later, the truth settled in. Uncle Edet would never walk again. He had no wife, no children, and the brothers who helped him seize his late brother's property had long disappeared. Now he needed help. And the only people left were the ones he once cast aside. The hospital ward was quiet. Machines beeped softly, and sunlight filtered through the curtains. Uncle Edet sat in a wheelchair, his legs limp and lifeless. His face, once thin and full of pride, now carried the weight of regret. Imoh came every day, checking his vitals, adjusting his medicine, and speaking gently. He treated him no differently from other patients. He even called him sir. But Edet couldn't meet his eyes. One morning, while helping him with a sip of water, Imoh heard the words he never thought would come. I wronged you, Imoh, and your mother. I was blinded by greed. When your father died, I became a stranger to my own blood. Imoh said nothing. He only nodded and adjusted his uncle's pillow. That afternoon, when Mrs. Bassey finally came to the hospital, the room fell into silence. She stood at the doorway, her eyes steady, her hands folded. Uncle Edet's lips trembled. Sister-in-law, he said, lowering his eyes, I have no right to ask for anything, but I need forgiveness. Mrs. Bassey stepped into the room slowly. Forgiveness is not mine alone to give, she said. You took everything from us, our home, our peace. I begged for bread while you slept in comfort. I know, Edet whispered. I lived with it now, every day in this wheelchair. She looked at him, this man who once wore pride like a crown, now humbled and broken. I don't hate you, she said finally, but forgiveness takes time. As she turned to leave, Imoh touched her shoulder. Mama, what he needs now is not punishment, it's compassion. She looked back once more, then left the room. The past still burned, but now, From its ashes, something new was beginning to rise. Uncle Edet was discharged from the hospital a few weeks later, but he had nowhere to go. His old friends had vanished. The relatives who once dined at his table stopped answering his calls. He sat under a mango tree outside the hospital in his wheelchair, clutching a plastic bag with his clothes and documents. People passed him by like a stranger. Some stayed, none stopped. Inside the hospital, Dr. Imoh watched through the window. His heart was heavy. He walked into the matron's office where Nurse Ikoh was on duty. "Is there any home that could take him in?" She shook her head. "None that would like to take him without money or family support, and from what I hear, he has neither." That evening, Imoh returned home and sat across from his mother. "He has nowhere to go, Mama." Mrs. Bassey stirred her pot of soup without looking up. "That is his cross." "But Mama, he's my father's brother. Whether we like it or not, we are all he has." She said nothing for a long time. Then, without turning around, she whispered, "He didn't show us mercy." Imoh rose from the stool. "And yet we survived, because someone did." Those words hung in the air. The next morning, the neighbors were shocked to see Uncle Edet being wheeled into Bassey's compound. His hands shook, his eyes avoided everyone's. Mrs. Bassey opened the door silently. "I am not here to stay long," Edet muttered, "just until I can find something." "No one lives in the past forever," she replied. "But if we are here, you live by our rules. Respect, peace, and no bitterness." He nodded slowly. Just like that, under one tiny roof, the past, the present, and a new chance began to live side by side. The small apartment was never meant for three, especially not for history as heavy as theirs. But Mrs. Bassey, Imoh, and Uncle Edet now shared its narrow walls and even narrower silence. Mornings were quiet. Edet would sit by the window, staring into the street as school children passed by. Nurse Ikoh visited often, helping with his therapy. She brought ointment, soft towels, and conversation that lightened the air. One day, while adjusting Edet's wheelchair, Ikoh said, "You're lucky to have them. Most people would have left you out there." "I don't deserve it," he replied, voice low. "Not after what I did." "But they did it anyway," she said, smiling gently. "That is the thing about grace. It doesn't wait for you to deserve it." Edet's eyes followed Imoh, who returned late from the hospital each day, tired but cheerful. He sometimes brought leftover bread from the staff canteen. Other days, it helped Edet shift into bed, not once speaking of the past. Mrs. Bassey cooked without complaint. She placed food on Edet's table, never warm nor cold, just enough. One evening, Edet broke the silence. "I remember your father, Imoh. He was a good man, gentle, honest. I betrayed his memory." Imoh looked up from his bowl. "Then live differently now. That is how you honor him." The room fell into quiet again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was the kind of silence that heals. That night, for the first time, Edet wheeled himself to the kitchen and helped wash the plates. His hands were slow. The water was cold, but no one stopped him. The past couldn't be erased, but the present was a new door. And slowly, one creak at a time, it was opening. The days rolled by like beads on a string, uneventful but full of small changes. Uncle Edet, once a man of pride and sharp words, began to soften. He started by sweeping the small compound using a broom tied to a long stick. He helped Nurse Ikwo with folding laundry when she visited. He even began teaching Imoh's younger neighbors math and proverbs under the mango tree. People noticed, some whispered, others watched in silence. But slowly, the once hardened man in a wheelchair became Papa Edet to the children on the street. One afternoon, a young boy knocked on their door. He had a swollen ankle from a fall. Edet quickly called Imoh and helped calm the child until treatment came. That evening, he looked at Imoh and smiled faintly. "Feels good to be useful again." Imoh nodded. "That is what community is. No one is useless where there is love." Meanwhile, Mrs. Bassey remained cautious. Her kindness was never cold, but it was measured. She watched her brother-in-law closely. One night, as they washed dishes together, Edet spoke. "I may never walk again, but being here has taught me to stand, at least in spirit." She looked at him long and hard. "I'm still learning how to trust you." "I don't expect it," he replied, "but I will earn it one day at a time." A long silence passed between them, but this one felt different, like a wound slowly learning how to close. Later that week, Edet began writing letters, apologies to the family members he once wronged, to the community elders he had ignored, and to the wife he never married because pride got in the way. He wrote with shaky hands, but steady purpose. Sometimes, healing doesn't come as a miracle. Sometimes, it arrives as a letter soaked in ink and humility. The rainy season came with its usual rhythm, grey skies, the patter of drops on zinc roofs, and the earthy smell of soaked ground. But inside the small home of the Basseys, something had changed. Peace had taken root. Uncle Edet now kept a small notebook by his bed. He called it his book of repentance. Every night he wrote something, memories, confessions, dreams he once chased and those he let die. But most of all, he wrote about gratitude. One morning, he asked Imoh to wheel him to the cemetery. They stood quietly before Imoh's grave marked Chief Bassey, beloved husband and father. "I never mourned your father properly," Edet said, voice cracking. "I envied him for being loved." Imoh knelt and touched the headstone. "He would have wanted you to do right, not drown in guilt." Beside them, Mrs. Bassey stood still. Then softly she said, "Your brother forgave easily. Perhaps that is why God called him early." For the first time in years, Edet wept, not in pain, but release. Back home, a small ceremony was held. Neighbors gathered. Nurse Ikwo brought food. Children sang. A pastor gave thanks for second chances. Edet, sitting in his wheelchair, read a short message. "I once lost everything: mobility, dignity, and the respect of those I loved. But somehow, I gained something greater: family that forgave, and love I never earned. To every soul I hurt, I say, may my new life be my apology." Tears rolled down faces, even Mrs. Bassey's, and when it ended, she walked over, placed her palm gently on his shoulder, and nodded. In the heart of Uyo, a family once torn apart had been stitched together, not by blood alone, but by mercy, choice, and grace. And that, dear listener, is how the river of faith bends when the heart forgives.